Hey guys, Jen here, the Feel Good Life Coach. Welcome to my live training on how to tell a new story about yourself and your life. So I'm going to give you guys a couple of seconds to pop on, and then I'm going to get going. For anyone who is watching live and wants to participate along with what I'm going to be going over, you can, just change the lighting. I'm trying to find the best lighting actually. You can get your notebook, get your journal, because I'm going to be going over the questions right now, and you can actually do them live with me here. And for anyone watching the replay, because I know most of you are going to watch the replay, same thing. You can just get your journal or a notebook and write your responses down there, or I would love for you to do it in the comments of this video so that I can actually help you, give you some coaching, help you to really start to recognize your stories and then start to tell a different story. So if that sounds like something that you could use, then, stick around. And like I said, if you want to play along, just put your responses to the questions that I ask in the comments below so that I can see them. And I'm happy to help you to dig out some of those stories. I'm happy to help you, figure out how to tell a new story and to give you some coaching. So like I said, just drop your responses in the comments. Okay, so let's start off with what is a story, right? So usually when you hear the word story, especially for me, for the people in my audience, I think our first thought is fiction, right? Because we write fiction. Most of us that follow me that are in my audience write fiction or want to write fiction. And so when we think story, we think fiction. And it's not actually that funny that you think that, because actually most stories that we tell ourselves are fiction. So what is a story in the sense of how I'm talking about it here for this training? So a story, how I define it, is a limiting belief that you have that is keeping you stuck, that is holding you back from having what you want, that is getting in your way, that is limiting what is possible or available for you, and that is total BS. So a story is basically just a made-up thing. And this is good, right? Because if you can make up a story that doesn't serve you, you can make up one that does. And that is what we're here to do today. So the first thing you need to do to start to pull out your stories, start to figure out what is it that I've been telling myself that is actually limiting me, that is stopping me, that is keeping me stuck. And really to dig deep into all of that. But before you can start to look at what are my stories, you have to first look at what do I want? So what is it that I actually desire in my life, in my business, in whatever specific area you would like to make changes in? You have to be very clear on what it is you want, because if you're not clear on what you want, it's going to be kind of hard to know whether or not you're going to be able to get it, right? Because you're not clear on it. So know what it is you want, and then we can start looking at, well, how have you been stopping yourself from getting it? So what is it that you want? I would say just choose one specific thing. It could be, overall, or it could just be in a certain area of your life or your business. Like maybe you want more clients, or maybe you want a change in your body situation, or maybe you want to change your health, or maybe you want, whatever. So it doesn't really matter what it is that you want. It's personal to you, and it is whatever it is. But you need to know what it is, right? So you have to be very clear on it. Now, like I said, if you want to play along, and I highly recommend that you do, drop your responses to these questions in the comments, because I would love to really help you to identify your stories so that you can rewrite it and tell a different story. So what is it that you want? I don't know. You get to decide that, right? So what is it that you want? So take a minute right now and either write it in the comments or write it down on your notebook or a piece of paper or whatever you have with you, and just get really clear on what it is you want. Now, I'm going to give you an example to go through for all of these questions, so that way you see what I'm talking about when I explain a story and how it really works. So what is it that you want? So I would say most people, not everybody, but most people, I think, would say, I want more money, right? I want to make more money. I want to make a ton of money. I want to be a millionaire. I want to have whatever, right? So I want to make more money. That's most people, I would say. Most people want to make more money. And even if you're making a ton of money, you still probably want to make more, right? So that's just how it is. So what do you want? I want to make more money. Okay, great. Next question. Why don't you have that yet? Now, this is the most important question, I think, out of all of them, because this is where you're really going to start to see your stories. Why do you not have whatever it is you said you wanted in the first question? So with the example of money, why is it you don't have the money that you desire? Right? So you may not know why specifically, but you have reasoning that you've been telling yourself for why, right? So why you don't have the money you want. because writers are broke, because being an entrepreneur is really hard and it's really hard to make sales, because of coronavirus, because I've been in lockdown all year, because my business is not making as much money as it was. I'm not making the money I want because I'm too busy. My kids get in my way and they stop me from doing what I want to do, because I have a day job and it just makes me so tired that I can't make money doing anything else. Like, what reasons do you have for why you don't have the thing you want yet, right? So this is important because this is where you're going to start to see the stories. So what is it for you, right? What is the reason or reasons that you've been telling yourself for why you don't have what you want? Now, it's going to be different for everybody, like I said, and it really doesn't matter what it is that you think is the reason why. It's just that you are clear on what the reasons are, right? So what comes up for you when you think about not having the thing you want and why you don't have it yet? Because everybody, like I said, is going to have some reason that they've come up with or that they've been telling themselves or convincing themselves for why they don't have it. So what is the reason for you for not having the thing that you want? So for example, if your thing is money, what is the reason you don't have the money you want? It could be like a million different things, right? So as an example, like I was saying, maybe you have a story that writers are broke. Maybe you have a story that it's really hard to make money online. Maybe you've told yourself that, you have to work harder. You're not working enough hours. You're not putting enough effort in. Like, whatever your reasons are, you need to know what they are, right? And you need to be clear on that so that you can start to move through this. So again, I would love to see in the comments if you want to share what you want and then what your reason is for why you don't have it yet. So, what are you telling yourself for why you don't have it? And I'm going to give you another example for my own personal stuff. So one example for me was back in 2016 when I was sort of looking at my writing career, looking at my books that I had written. At that point, there was only a couple of them. And I was like, you know what? Like, I just really want to be a best-selling author. Like, I just really want to see my book at #1 on Amazon. Like, I wanted to sell more books, have more people reading my books. So that was what I wanted, right? And then what I was telling myself about why I didn't have it yet was, it's really hard to become a bestseller on Amazon. It's impossible. It's really hard to rank at #1. I don't think I could sell enough books to get there. Like, I haven't been able to sell enough books. People don't really pay attention to what I'm doing. So, they're not buying my books. Like, this was the things I was telling myself for why I wasn't a best-selling author at that point. So why do you not have the thing that you want? Everybody has a reason for why they don't have the things that they want. Now, this is the most important question, like I said, because this is where all your stories are. So if you can start to look at that and ask yourself, again, why do I not have what I want? What comes up? And those things are all stories. They're all just things that you have made up or that you have been told by someone else or society has fed to you that is now convinced you that this is what's keeping you from having the thing you want. But really, it's just a story. It's just a made up story. And that's it. That's literally all it is. So why was I not a best-selling author? Because I didn't decide to be, because I didn't actually do the work to become one, right? So these were my reasons, but those were also stories. They were also like, it's too hard. I don't have enough followers. I don't think I could sell enough books. Like, those are just stories. Those are just stories you're telling yourself. And they're not serving you, right? Whatever story you're telling yourself, it's not serving you, because if it was, you would have what you want already. Period. End of story. So the fact that you don't have it means you have stories that are keeping you from getting it. Really, really big thing. And that's why you need to identify what the stories are, right? So what is it that you've been telling yourself for why you don't have it, or why you don't get to have it, or why it's not available to you, or why you can't afford it, or why whatever, right? Why the moon is not in the right phase and it's Mercury retrograde and so you can't have the thing you want. Like, those are all stories. They're just stories. And none of that actually affects you unless you choose to take it on as a story and then identify with it, right? And say that this is true for me. But otherwise, it's not real, right? You can make up any kind of story you want about your situation. And by changing the story, you change the outcome. You start to get a different outcome in your life. So my story was, back in 2016, that it's too hard to be a best-selling author, that I don't have a big enough following to sell enough books to hit #1, etc. So those were the stories that were keeping me stuck. They were keeping me from getting what I wanted, which was to be a best-selling author on Amazon. Okay, now we're going to talk a little bit about quantum physics. So if you're not super familiar with quantum physics, this might be a newer thing to you. But if you are familiar with this, then it might just be something that helps you to understand it at a whole new level. So in quantum physics, they have proven that everything exists all at the same time, right? The past, the present, the future, it's not a separate thing. It all exists now. Everything, all of it. Time is an illusion, right? So if all things exist at the same time, then there is technically no such thing as a condition. Because anything you want, any outcome you want, any result you want to have, anything you desire, it all exists now. It's all existing at the same time. The only difference is that you've been focused on whatever story you've been telling yourself. And that story has created conditions that put blocks and challenges in your way of getting what you want. And those stories become a limiting way for you to see and experience your life and your reality. So while those things you want actually are real, they do exist and they exist now and they're available now, you don't have them because your story is that you don't get to have it, right? Or that you, whatever. So whatever your story is. But in quantum physics, conditions do not exist. Conditions are not things that is made up by humans, right? We humans put conditions on things. We humans say, in order to get the dream house, I have to first fix my credit and I need to get a really good loan and I need to blah, 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 all these things. But those are just conditions we have put in the place of us getting the thing we want. But I'm sure there are people out there, and I know you could find people out there who have bought a house without all of those conditions, who had bad credit and still were able to get a house, were still able to get what they want. So those are conditions you have put on yourself. They are not real, except for that you've taken them on as real. So knowing this, you can change your story at any time. You can decide that this is not going to be my story anymore. I'm going to have what I want. It's going to be mine. And that's it, right? I'm unavailable for anything else. So in 2016, that was what I decided. I decided, you know what? I'm going to be a best-selling author this year. I don't know how it's going to happen, but I'm going to make it happen. I just made that decision. I said, this is it. It's happening this year. I don't know when, but it's happening this year. And so, of course, I had to first get rid of those stories that said, I couldn't do it. I didn't have big enough following. I couldn't sell enough books. Because those stories, those conditions, and the conditions being, oh, well, I need a bigger audience, right? Because I thought, well, I don't have a big enough audience to sell enough books. That's a story. I thought, well, I need to have more books published. Again, also a story. Oh, well, I need to, have more people following me, and I need to have, be more well known, right? Because if I'm not well known enough, people aren't going to buy my books. I don't have the ability to sell enough books. Again, just a story. So once I got rid of those stories and decided that I was not going to live from that place anymore, I was going to change the story I was telling myself in that area, I got a whole new different outcome, right? So I started to tell the story of, I am a best-selling author. It's so easy to hit number one in my category on Amazon. I have a huge following. I have tons of people who read my books and who want to buy more of them. Those were the news stories that I started to tell myself. And within 4 months of deciding that I was going to be a best-selling author and releasing all of those stories, it happened. So my book hit number one in my category on Amazon, and I became a best-selling author. And then, not only did that happen, but then I wrote a second book after that, or actually technically it was my fourth book at that point, or my fifth book. I don't know. It was a lot of books. But I had also been writing more books because I knew that if I'm going to be a best-selling author, I'm going to need more books out there, or at least that was my story. So I started to write more books. And so that book hit number one in my category. Completely amazing. And then the next one that I wrote not only hit number one in my category, but it also hit number one in 2 other categories, and it stayed at number one in one of those 3 categories for an entire month. So every day I would go into Amazon and I would go to that category, my book would still be at number one for the entire month. So take that story about not having a big enough following and not having enough people to sell my book to and whatever, right? It's bullshit. It's just things I was telling myself that was actually stopping me from getting what I wanted. So removing those stories and installing a new story allowed me to have a different outcome. So this is how it works, right? So if all of the things you want are available right now, right? Every single outcome in the entire world exists right now. You just have to tune yourself to the outcome you desire. In order to do that, you have to shift your focus, you have to shift your mindset, you have to shift your attention, your energy, and most importantly, you have to stop telling the old stories that are keeping you stuck where you are right now. So if I had continued to tell the story that it's too hard to be a bestseller, I can't hit number one, I don't have enough people following me to sell enough books, even to this day, I would not be a best-selling author because I would still be living those stories. And the thing with our stories or our conditions that we put on ourselves is that whatever we decide is true for us is true for us. And so even though it's not actually true probably, and even though there are other people who have proven that it's possible that they can do it, you can't because you have put that limitation on yourself. You have stopped yourself from having the things that are going to come to you to actually help you to do it, right? That are going to inspire you, that are going to give you the opportunity or the nudges or whatever, you're not open to those. They're just not going to show up for you because you have a story that basically puts blinders on. So it's like, no, my story is that I can't sell books because I don't have a big enough following. So suddenly that's what happens, right? You have blinders. Now you can't see anything else. So everything that goes on in your life matches that story. And so in order to change it, you have to change the story. And most importantly, you have to change the story at the level of subconscious mind. Because unfortunately, when you've told a story about yourself long enough, not only do you believe it, but you program it into yourself, right? So your subconscious mind learns by repetition. And most of what's in your subconscious mind was given to you between the ages of 0 and 7 years old, right? So everything you saw during those years, you were not able to decipher what is true or not true. You did not have a filter in your mind. Your brain was still developing. And at that point, you were mostly in theta state, which is basically a meditative state where you're just like a sponge, right? Everything just comes in and you have no way of deciphering whether or not you should actually take it on as true or not. Now, after 7 years, you're already programmed. And unless you make changes where you're consistently repeating something, you're just going to live that same story your entire life, right? So you know people who you knew 10 years ago, and 10 years later, they're still the same person, right? They're exactly the same. They haven't changed at all. And it's because they still live that same story. They still live from the same place, the same beliefs, and the same story that they're telling about their life and themselves, which keeps them stuck in that story. But like I said, because quantum physics says all possibilities exist all at the same time, then you can change your story by just focusing on another option, right? Another possibility, and deciding that, no, wait, I am going to be a best-selling author. It is going to happen this year, and that's it. And then getting rid of any stories or programming that tells you otherwise. And then, of course, there are actions and things, but those are not going to come until you align yourself with the story that is actually going to get you what you want, right? If you're telling a story that is in opposition to what you want, you cannot attract the things that will help you to get what you want, right? Because you're going to always be in the opposition of it. So that's why it's so important to not only be clear on what stories you're telling yourself, but to recognize that that's what they are, right? That they are stories and that they are not actual truths. They are just things you've taken on. Now, if you have a story that's actually benefiting you, right? So it's a good thing. Like I have a story that says, I brush my teeth every night. I floss my teeth every night. So every night I do both of those things, even if I'm super tired, even if I fall asleep on the couch and wake up at 4 a.m., like I still will brush and floss my teeth before I actually go to bed. So that's my story, right? Is that I take care of my teeth. So of course, that is the actions that I take that kind of fit with that story. But if I had a story that said, which I used to have a story that said, I have bad teeth, I get tons of cavities, that was my experience. Like every year I would go to the dentist or every 6 months or whatever, and I would get, oh, you have cavities. Oh, you have more cavities. And I had a point where I had had like 20 different cavity fills, and it was insane, right? So that was my old story though. My old story was that my teeth are bad. I don't have good teeth. So for that reason, I would experience that over and over again. Every time I went to the dentist, there'd be another problem, another problem. Well, I ended up having a really bad problem at this point, I say a few years. It was 2007, so that's not a few years. It's a way longer than that. But in 2007, I went to the dentist again to hear them tell me the same story, which was that I had bad teeth. And they told me that not only did I have 8 cavities, but they were cavities in teeth that had already been filled, meaning I had cavities in those teeth previously and they got filled, and now I have new cavities in those exact same teeth. So my story had just gotten to that point where like it was torture. It was absolutely torture. And then I was like now having to have like teeth surgery basically, because they were like, your teeth are so bad, we can't fill them anymore. Like there's no way to do it. So we either have to put crowns on, or we have to give you inlays. And inlays is basically like they hollow out the inside of your tooth and then they put a fake thing inside. So your outside of your tooth is still real, but the inside isn't real anymore. And they were like, yeah, you have 8 teeth that have these cavities. We can't fill them because they already have fillings. You're going to have crowns or inlays. So I decided to go with the inlays because I didn't want to get crowns, because they told me crowns, I might have to have them again years after that. And with the inlays, even though it costs more, very much more than what I would have paid for the crowns, I knew that would solve most of the problem. And then if I started to take care of my teeth, that I wouldn't have to deal with that cavity problem anymore. So I went through the surgery, did all the stuff. And then of course, from that moment on, I made sure that I had a story that said, I floss my teeth, I brush my teeth every night. Now I already brushed my teeth every night, but I wasn't flossing. And that was causing me to have bad teeth. So now When I go to the dentist, I don't have that story anymore. So when I go, they tell me I have beautiful teeth. My teeth are amazing. They can't believe how good they are. Like, wow, your teeth are really clean. They're really like nice. But that was because I changed my story. So until 2007, I had a story that said I have bad teeth. And so that's what I had. But once I made that decision that this is not my story anymore, then I was able to create something new. And now I don't have that problem, right? So now when I go to the dentist, I haven't had a cavity fill since 2007. And that's pretty awesome, right? But it was because I changed my story. If I hadn't changed the story, I would still to this day be having cavities. And that's just how it goes, because you cannot outrun your stories, right? Your stories are always going to keep you stuck. They're always going to keep you on that hamster wheel. So you have to recognize that that's what they are. And then you have to give yourself new stories. And I'm going to tell you how to do that in 1 second. Okay, so I don't see any comments. I don't know if Facebook is just not showing them to me, because sometimes that does happen. So if anyone is commenting and I just can't see your comments, I will come back and check them after, and I will respond to them in the comments of the video. But if you're watching and you're like, haven't commented yet, I would love for you to comment right now and tell me what you want and why you don't have it yet. So what is your reason? What is your story for why you don't have it? Okay, so if all possibilities and all options and all things exist all at the same time, then you just get to tell a new story and you get to experience a new outcome. And it can really be that simple. Now, of course, there's more to it as far as the programming part goes, which we'll talk about in a second. But the next part is that you're just going to write a new story. That's it. You're just going to write a new story. So whatever it is you want, now you've recognized why you don't have it, and those stories that you've been telling yourself around whatever it is that you don't have. Hey, DK, how are you? If you're playing along and you want to answer the questions, the first one is, what do you want? The second one is, why don't you have it yet? And what are the stories in that? So, kind of looking at your, why don't I have it yet? And then kind of pulling the stories out of that. Okay, so you're going to rewrite your story. How do you do that? So you're like, all right, I get it. It's a story that, whatever your thing is. So my example in the beginning was money. So I want more money. My reason for not having it is because whatever, I was just making up excuses. So someone might say they don't have it because of the quarantine or because of COVID or because of whatever. Those are just stories, because there are plenty of people who have thrived this year in their businesses, in their lives, even with COVID. And that's the whole truth. So one of the things my coach taught me a long time ago was that if you can look around you in the world and see that other people are not having the same experience that you are, that means there is another option available. If every single person is having the exact same experience as you, then that means that it's like, what's the word? It basically means that everybody in the entire world has this thing. But because that's unlikely, meaning there's never going to be 2 people or 3 people, 5 people all experience the exact same thing in the exact same way, that means it's not actually true. That means there's another option available, unless it's true for everybody, right? So if it's true for everybody, then it's a universal law. So true things for everybody would be like law of attraction. No one escapes law of attraction. It doesn't matter whether you believe in it or not. No one escapes it. We all use it 24/7, 365 for our entire lives, because it is a universal law. What you put out, you get back. That's just, it's the energy thing. What you're focusing on, you're going to attract more of. That's just how it works. That's the nature of our universe. So that is going to be true for everybody. But is everybody broke right now? Is everybody not having their dream job? Is everybody whatever you're telling yourself about why you don't have the thing you want? No. And that is how you know that it's not actually true and that there's another option available. So what are you going to tell yourself now? What is your new story going to be about whatever it is that you want to change? So if it's money, what is the new story you're going to tell about money? What is the new story you're going to tell about yourself in whatever area you want to make a change in? And I'm going to give you a specific example for that too. I think I'm telling myself a new story already, just looking for confirmation. Awesome. Well, that's good. That's really good. If you know that you have recognized an old story and you've rewritten it and started to talk about it in a different way, that's awesome, because that is how you make a change, right? But it is repetition. So continue doing that. Whatever you're doing, just keep it up. Just keep it going and be consistent, because that is how you're going to reprogram that story. Okay, so you're going to write your new story. You can write it in the comments if you want. You could just write it in your journal. But what you're going to do now is you're going to tell yourself a new story about whatever thing you want to change. So in the example of money, if you've been telling yourself right now that, money is hard and money is hard to come by and, COVID ruined the economy and whatever things, now you're going to tell yourself the opposite of that, right? And whatever that means for you. So the example I was going to use is a lake house. So I am manifesting a lake house right now. It's something that I've been working on I would say this year, but really it's only been probably like 4 months that I've been focused on it. But of course, I also had conditions in place, stories that I had around what it was going to take for me to get the lake house, what it was going to mean, blah, 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 all these things. So I've had to rework all of that and to tell myself a different story. And so the way that I was able to get into alignment with like, what is the story I want to tell to have the thing that I want is looking at, okay, can I separate myself from this thing, right? Because we get so caught up in the things that we want, we don't realize that we're so close to it, right? We don't think like, oh, like we can't really see the outside perspective of it. So how are you going to do that is instead of looking at yourself, right? You're not going to say, well, what beliefs would I have if this was true for me? Because we can do that. And that is one way to do it. But I don't think it's the best way because I think you're still too close to it at that point. And even for me, like when I would say to myself, okay, like what beliefs do I need in order to have my lake house? Like some of that was things that I wouldn't have even come up with if I asked myself this other question that I'm going to tell you. But some of the stuff I did come up with at that point was like, okay, well, the beliefs I'm going to need to have my lake house are like, I make a lot of money and whatever, right? So I was coming up with all these things. I have great credit and my credit score is amazing. And like all these conditions that I thought that I had to be in place in order for me to get what I wanted. And was like, okay, well, I'm rewriting those stories. But when I separated myself from the outcome and I was like, okay, what would somebody else who already has this outcome that I want, what would their story be, right? So if you think about it that way, right? So you're detaching yourself from it and you're looking at it from an outside perspective of somebody else who already has what you want. So if I was looking at somebody who already lives in a lake house, right? They already have a lake house, they own a lake house, they live on the lake, what would their story be? And the simplest little things came through to me. And I was like, wow, why did I not see that before? Number one story this person would have, I live on the lake. Very simple, right? But that's a story. I live on the lake. That is a story a person who owns a lake house has. I live on the lake. What's another story that they have? I can afford to live on the lake. They clearly would believe and have that story. I can afford to live on the lake because they already live on the lake. Next story they might have. I love living on the lake. I get to live on the lake, like whatever, right? I get to own a lake house. I own a lake house. That's another story they would have. I own a lake house, right? Like when you look at it from another perspective and you're not comparing it to yourself, like trying to figure out what you would believe, what would somebody else believe who already has the thing you want, right? What is their story? And then how can you adopt that story yourself? So that's what I started to do was I started to create new beliefs around what this story would be. So the story about my lake house, the story about money, like whatever things. And now I just do that story every day, right? So I have an audio that I listen to that does belief statements. I have things that I journal out and I write. I talk through myself all the time. So I'm always talking to myself throughout the day. Like, I love my lake house. I live in a lake house. It's so fun to live on the lake. How cool is it to get to look out the window and see the lake? Like, yeah, I'm not looking at the lake right now. I'm looking at a swimming pool. But the point is, I'm pretending that it's the lake and I'm pretending that I'm living on the lake right now and I'm talking as if I already do. So it's telling that new story and getting it to sink into your subconscious mind. And like I said, that is a repetition thing. So the more you can repeat the story to yourself, the more you can either write it out every day or talk it out every day or like record an audio of yourself telling the new story about whatever thing you're wanting to change and then just listening to it over and over again or writing it out over and over again or whatever, right? So you can choose what works best for you, but it's about repetition and it's about telling a new story from the perspective of how you actually want it to be, not how it's been, not how you think that it has to be, but how you actually want it to be, right? If anything was available for you, if you could have it any way you wanted, that's how you want to focus on it, right? Because it is all available right now. It is all in existence right now. Everything that exists already exists all at the same time, right? Quantum physics. So for that reason, the thing you want exists, right? So the version of me who has the lake house, that already exists. It's already a real thing. I am just not tuned to that frequency, right? I am still tuned to the frequency of I don't have the lake house. And so I don't have the lake house. But as I move myself up the frequency, right, up to the level of like, yes, I believe I have this. I'm doing the actions that align with this. I'm talking myself through, believing it, right, telling the story over and over again. And then what happens is that you start to put yourself on the frequency of the thing that you desire, and then that thing can actually come into your life. So another really, really good example that I'm going to give you guys here about stories and how they hold you back and how you can change them is that I used to have a story that said the kind of guy I would want to date does not live in Rochester, New York. So I don't know how many people know about Rochester, New York. It's a city in upstate New York. It's between Buffalo and Syracuse. It's not a big city, but it's big enough, right? I think it's like the 79th biggest city in the country or something. So it's not huge, but it's not tiny. But for me, I grew up here. I've lived here most of my life, and I've always had a belief that this place is backwards, that it's behind the times, and that it's just not really a happening place, right? That's the belief I've always had about it. That's why I left after I graduated from college, or actually after high school I left, and I stayed in New York State, but then I ended up moving out of state and going to California after I graduated from college. And every time I was like, I will never live in Rochester again because Rochester sucks and blah, 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 right? I had all this story about Rochester and about living here. But when I moved back here in January of 2019 after my divorce, I knew that I would have to get rid of all of these stories if I was going to be able to be happy here, if I was going to be able to date here, if I was going to be able to live here. I had to get rid of the stories because if I had those stories, it was going to make me miserable. And my experience living here was going to be miserable. And yeah, I could move, of course, but I have family here. I have a niece and nephew now, and I want to see them grow up, right? I wanted to be around for them to see them have their childhood. And I didn't want to be the aunt that was always missing. So for that reason, yay, my coach is here. Hi. So for that reason, I was like, I have to change these stories. I have to change these stories so that I can live here and be happy and I can do the things I want to do. And one of my stories was that the kind of guy I want to date does not live in Rochester, right? So thank you. I like hot. Yeah, I'm feeling hot today. Good energy and, drinking my high vibe water. Feeling good. What I was saying about, what was the thing? Oh, yeah, okay. So I had a belief that I could not find the guy I wanted in Rochester, right? Because the type of guy I wanted, I imagined I had to live in a place like Portland or like Southern California or like some place where people are more open-minded, more new agey, that kind of thing, right? I told myself that was the belief that I had, like that the guy I want is not going to be in Rochester. Well, that's going to be a really hard belief to get over if you're still living that story, right? So you're continuing to tell that story. The guy I want won't be in Rochester. Well, if you're going to try to date here, then you're not going to meet anybody because you're going to have that story that says the guy is not going to be in this city. He's not going to live here. Or that's just going to stop you from dating at all because you're like, oh, he's not going to live here anyway. I'm not going to bother. So that was a story I had to rewrite. I had to change it. I had to program something new so that I could get a different result. Because I didn't date very much when I lived here growing up because I just didn't. I had tons of beliefs about things that were holding me back and stopping me from doing a lot of the things I wanted. And so I had to change the story. I had to change the story to something different so that I could date if I wanted to while I lived here. And so that's what I did. So last year I worked for like 4 months solid on overcoming this programming, changing my beliefs around what I thought was possible in this city and all of that stuff. And I ended up meeting the most amazing person, the most amazing guy I've ever met in my entire life, like literally the best relationship I've ever had. And he not only lives in Rochester, but he lived right down the street from my dad's house, which is where I was living last year. And he lives off of my absolute all-time favorite road in Rochester, which is also the road that's named as my dog, right? So my dog's name is Wyland. There's a road in Rochester called Wyland, and he lives off of that road. So I'm like, this is the universe showing me, right? That like you get rid of the old story and you get to have what you want. And just in case you wanted to think that it was like just some random thing, I'm going to make sure that you know for sure it wasn't random, right? Because random that he was down the street and on my favorite road, like, come on, that's not random. That is the universe being like, when you get rid of the stories, when you stop telling yourself stuff that's not true, you get to have what you want and it gets to be amazing, right? So that was a story that I rewrote for myself. And now I get to have this amazing relationship and still live in Rochester. Amazing, right? So what story are you telling yourself and how are you going to change it? The number one way to change it is to look at someone who already has it or just in general, right? It doesn't have to be maybe you don't know somebody who has what you want, but you could find somebody, I'm sure. But if not, just look in general. What would their story be? If they had the relationship, if they had the money, if they had the business, if they had the whatever thing you want, what would their story be? And then that is now your story. That is the story you are going to take on and make true for yourself. And how you're going to do that is with repetition, with mindset work. So every day doing some kind of mindset work where you're programming those beliefs into yourself and changing the story. And of course, making sure that you are giving yourself permission to tell another story, right? To tell a story that is different than the story that you've been telling. And yes, it is going to take time. It is going to take some being consistent, obviously. It's going to take being courageous a little bit, because it is scary sometimes to think about not living a story we've had for such a long time. Because that was my story, like I said, for my entire life. There are no good guys in Rochester. The kind of guy I would want to date wouldn't live in Rochester. That story could have stopped me from dating somebody or from finding this amazing person that I now get to be with. So I had to get rid of the story. And you have to do the same thing if you want to be happy, if you want to have the things you want in life. You have to change your stories. And yes, it can be scary. It can be, confronting, because maybe you had this story for a long time and now you're like, man, that's a story and I need to change it. So give yourself some grace, be patient. Don't think that you have to do everything overnight, because you don't, but just know that it's a story and know that you are absolutely in control and that you can change it at any time. So that is how you change a story. And that is how you recognize that you're telling a story, because it's all stories. No matter who you are or what you have or don't have, like, we tell stories about everything, right? We tell stories about why we think something's happening, why we don't think it's happening. Like, we have made up stories about other people. We judge things and we have stories. Like, we're just human. This is what we do as humans. We're meaning-making machines. We make meaning about things because that's how we relate to stuff, right? That's how we understand our world and our lives, is that we make meaning. We try to find ways to make things mean things. So it doesn't mean anything except the meaning that you give it. And you can change that meaning at any time. So that's it, right? That's just how it is. And so now you're going to go and do that. So you're going to figure out what it is you want. You're going to ask yourself, why don't I have it yet? You're going to identify the stories in that. And then you are going to write a new story. So what is the opposite of that story? And how can you start to tell that to yourself now? And then, of course, the more you do that, the more you're going to actually experience it. And now I say be patient, because it does take time for your physical reality to catch up to the new story. So you might be like, man, I've been telling this story for a week now and nothing has changed. Keep going. Just keep going. And just know that if you keep going, it will eventually show up in your reality. You will start to feel different internally, and that will show up differently in your external world, because our external world is created by the internal world. So it's a reflection. Like, people say the universe tests us. No, the universe doesn't test. It reflects. It reflects. It is reflecting whatever you have going on inside. So if you don't have what you want, it's because you have something going on internally that is reflecting back that you don't have it, that you don't get to have it, that you're stopping yourself from having it. So now you get to choose different, and you get to program something new so that you can have a different result. To me, what you're talking about sounds more like a belief statement than a story or narrative. To me, a story would be more of a worldview and then an explanation of why things are the way they are. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. So a belief statement to me is the same thing as a story. It's really the same thing. So you're telling a new story, you're telling a new belief. Same thing. Because like I defined, and you might not have been here at the beginning of the live stream, but basically how I define a story is just a limiting belief. So it's the same thing. A worldview can be a story. Of course. It can also be a limiting belief, right? You can view the world a certain way, and that's a limiting belief. That's a belief that you have about the world. So the same thing, an explanation of why things are the way they are. Those are your reasons, which are also your stories. So yeah, I mean, to me, they're the same thing. But yeah, and the cool part is, if you are a fiction writer, which I know so many of you are who follow me, then it's even easier for you, because you know how to write things in detail. You know how to write narration. You know how to describe. So can you write a story about yourself having the thing you want? Can you write a story about your life being exactly how you want it to be? Use those vivid details. Use those 5 senses to describe things, and do it so that it feels real to you. Because how much does your fiction feel real to you? It feels real. The stories you have right now, whether they're good or bad, they're real. They feel real. So, and I don't think there are any stories that are good or bad. It's just a story either serves us or it doesn't. And that's it. So it's not that it's good or bad. It's just, it's either serving you or it's not. There was probably a time when those stories that I had previously served me, but they just don't anymore. And so now I'm ready to let them go, to change them. Same thing with you. Maybe up until now, your stories have served you in this area, and now you're choosing to have a different result. And that is okay. You're allowed to do that. You're always allowed to do that. So it's really about, what do you want? Why don't you have it? What are you telling yourself about why you don't have it? What are you making it mean? And what are the stories in that? And then how can you now rewrite that story to something else? And the number one way to do that is to just look at someone who has it, or think about someone who would have this thing, and then ask yourself, what would their story be? And then how can I take that story on for myself? And that's it. Pretty simple. Now, obviously, it takes time. It takes practice. It takes really being consistent and spending time every day working on your mindset, reprogramming the new story, like doing all those things. But I promise you, if you do that, it will work. And I am living proof of that, because I grew up with stories that did not serve me. I grew up with stories like, I get bullied. People don't like me. I'm not I'm not good enough. Like, these were stories I lived for my entire life, not realizing that that's what they were. So like my entire childhood up until 12th grade. So I'm talking, kindergarten-ish, all the way through 12th grade, I got bullied. Every single year, I got bullied. But why? Because I had a story that said I get bullied. And so that was my experience over and over and over again, because I kept telling myself that story. I get bullied. It doesn't matter what I do, I get bullied. People pick on me. People don't like me. That was my story. And thankfully, while I was in high school, I started to program a story without realizing it, that when I get to college, it'll get better. I don't know where that came from, but like I just had this thing come to me one day. I was like, oh, when I go to college, it'll get better. So that's what happened, right? I got bullied all the way through literally almost graduation day of high school. And then after that, it just went away. It just stopped. I never got bullied again, ever. Like, not even one time, because I had a story that said, once I'm out of high school, this is over. And that's it, right? That college is going to be different. And so it was like, yeah, it was different, because I said it was going to be. I made the story up that it was going to be. And so it was. So when I got to college, the things people used to pick on me for, I was getting praised for. The things that people used to bully me about, I was having friends in that thing, right? Like, so people used to bully me about being a writer and being in the creative stuff that I used to do, and like being part of the clubs at school. Well, now I was becoming friends with people in college who were really cool people, who were popular people, and who were also in the clubs and in the things that we were doing. So I had made a story that college was going to be better, and so it was. While you're talking about looking at someone who has it and then adopting their story reminds me of modeling something in NLP. Yeah, I don't know much about NLP, but I'm sure it's probably similar to that, because I know it is about reprogramming things. Neuro-linguistic programming, I believe it stands for. So it's obviously about programming, which is exactly what I'm talking about. So there are a lot of different tools out there for you to reprogram the stuff inside. Like, absolutely, you could use NLP, you could use EFT, you could use a therapist, you could do hypnotherapy, you could, just do mindset work every day like I've done. You can work with coaches. That's another thing that I've done a ton of over the past decade, is work with coaches. I pretty much always have a coach. Very rarely that I don't have a coach that I'm working with. So always something you can do to reprogram these stories and to live a new story. Now, if you would like support in doing this, right, because it does take 6 weeks-ish, they say, to reprogram a new belief, to reprogram a new way of thinking, and to really reprogram your subconscious mind. Now, it could take longer, depending on how long you've had a story, or how long you've been telling it, or really just like your willingness to be consistent and to get rid of the crap. It could take a little longer, but on average, they say it takes about 6 weeks. So if you would love to have support for 6 full weeks while you rewrite your story, right? While you tell a new story about your life, about your success, about your business, about whatever it is that you desire, then I want you to PM me, and I'm going to send you all the details about my brand new one-on-one program, Rewrite Your Life. So I'm going to support you for 6 weeks. This is a 6-week experience, one-on-one, where you will work with me to reprogram your stories, to reprogram your subconscious mind, to change your belief system, and to get yourself to a place where you are happy, where you feel good, and where you get to have the things you desire. Because right now, you're stuck, right? You're here because there's something you want that you don't have, or there's something you're trying to change that hasn't been able to be changed yet. So yeah, you could do it on your own, and it's probably going to take a lot longer. Or you could work with me and we could knock that shit out in 6 weeks or less. So if you want some support in rewriting your story and having a new story to tell about your life, about yourself, and really living from that place from here on out, then please PM me, and I'm going to send you info about Rewrite Your Life, 6 weeks, one-on-one with me. And I'm so excited to support people in this. I am going to be doing a discount for the first 2 people who signed up. So PM me right away if you're interested, because I'm only doing that for 2 people. And after that, it's going up to full price. So let me know if you have any questions about that or about anything else I've talked about here, because I'm always happy to answer your questions. I know most of you are going to watch this as a replay, so drop your questions in the comments. I will come back later to check them out. But that is it for me, guys. So I'm just going to give you a second in case you have any questions about anything I've talked about here. And then I'm going to go. And please, like I said, PM me about Rewrite Your Life, because it's going to be amazing. And I'm just so excited to get to support you in making the changes that you want to make in your life so that you can tell a story that is going to get you where you want to go, and that you're not going to continue to stop yourself, and you're not going to continue to be a self-sabotage for yourself, and you're not going to continue to not have the things you want. You're going to actually put yourself in the place where you get to have them. You're going to remove the programming that says you don't get to have them, and you're going to install the programming that's just like, this is what a person who has this thing, this is their programming, right? And you're going to live from that. Okay, well, then I'm going to go. Thank you so much for joining me for this little mini workshop. I hope that you've gotten something out of it. I would love to hear from you guys in the comments if you want to answer any of the questions that I gave you here, or if you have any questions about what I covered, or if you have any questions about Rewrite Your Life. I'm happy to answer those as well. So just comment below, PM me for details about the one-on-one program, and you'll be hearing a lot more about that over the coming days and weeks. But I just wanted to do this workshop, really get you guys thinking about the stories that you're telling, the stories that you're living from, because I promise you, that is the stuff that will keep you from having what you want. It will be the thing that you just keep living, right? So there was this quote that I heard, and I think it was in The Secret actually, but it was such a profound quote that it stuck with me all these years later. And I haven't watched that movie in a really long time, but it stuck with me because it was so true. And that is, some people, phone's ringing, some people live 1 year 90 times. And some people live 90 years, right? So some people live 90 years and some people live 1 year 90 times, right? Because if you don't change that programming, if you don't change your stories, you're just going to keep experiencing the same stuff over and over again until you die. And that's just how it goes. Or you could change your inner shit, change your inner world so that it reflects more of what you actually want to see. And then you can be the person who lives 90 years instead of the person who lives 90 years, but 1 year, but 90 times. So that is what I'm going to leave you with. Thank you so much for being here. I can't wait to see your questions in the comments for anyone who watches the replay. And until next time, remember, feeling good is the point and the path.